Welcome in to tonight's episode of Project Code Red with Brian and I. And tonight we have a special guest from across the pond that we are excited to have join us tonight. And without further delay, we're going to get him on here, see how he's doing. Arthur, how you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, brother. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
An absolute honor to join you guys. I'm a fan of Brian for about the last 10 years, probably, at least.
2010, I think, right?
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Done some stuff with you, Michael, and it's always a pleasure. And
that's when we all met, was back then around 2010.
Yeah.
And it's been good. Yes, it has been. Well, we're glad to have you on. And without further delay, let's get Brian here and see how he's doing. Brian, what's going on, brother?
Doing good. It's been one of those health weeks, and then on top of it, a mixture of historic work and keeping an eye on the news. And there's certain days where I don't know which one I want to work on more. But we've had a lot of things pop off this week.
Yeah, the ticker tape's going about 1,001 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So tonight I think we're going to try to reach in and grab a few points out off that ticker tape and try to bring them to the forefront of how they apply to what is to come by biblical standards.
Exactly.
So where are we going to start?
I wanted, I think, to start with an event that happened Sunday and really alarmed me. We had a gathering at Charlie Kirk's memorial, and Trump came in there and spoke for something like 45 to 55 minutes, and it turned into a big tirade about his political enemies and his hatred for them. And, Charlie Kirk's wife says that she forgave the shooter, and then Trump's like, well, I hate my enemies. I can't do that. And we're seeing that actually spill over in an extremely massive way throughout the rest of the week, just with little things that have happened on our soil, and never mind the fact that things that are spilling over into the international circle. I mean, things are just exploding.
I can't keep up. I think we've said it both. I've said it both episodes we've done so far. I can't keep up.
Yeah, it's getting wild.
It is. Did you see Keir Starmer calling for national ID for the right to work in the UK?
Wow. I didn't catch that one.
Yeah, it's up. It's out.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's another nationalist peak that's really exploding. And even at the UN this week, Trump he was supposed to speak for 15 minutes. And what did he do? He rambled for 45 minutes, and he told the European nations, you're all going to hell because of, migration and, the ones that are working towards climate change, regulations on things that are causing problems with the climate and all that. And then China steps to the table basically saying, well, we're going to move to the forefront of climate change now.
Going off the hook, and a lot of the, like you said, little things all in between are all connecting the dots of the bigger thing. Once again, can't keep up. You try going in to confirm research, go down the rabbit hole, and you spend hours looking around trying to find the confirmations. They're there. I mean, but you just got to look for them. And I don't think most people take the time to confirm what's popping. What do you think, Arthur?
Oh, yeah. I'm really getting wild out there. And when you mentioned about the UK, and I think actually all of Europe is kind of catching a bit of a nationalistic fire at the moment. They were showing some stuff about millions hitting the streets in London, the protests in honor of Charlie Kirk, but I'm not sure that was entirely the agenda there. Looked like a bit of a nationalistic rally to me, but I might be mistaken.
Well, it's exactly what it was. It was about the migration that was going on, and yeah, it locked hand in hand. And I'm sorry, folks, but this all locks hand in hand. I've tried to tiptoe around this, but it's all connected. It all is completely connected to this nationalistic fervor that has taken place across the United States, across all of Europe. It's been, at the forefront of things going on in the Middle East going back since World War I. And it still is part of what we're seeing take place even in the Middle East. So, I mean, I hate to say this, but even look at what's going on with the Zionist movement within Israel right now. It's part of a nationalist movement.
Yeah, I would also throw in Russia and Ukraine, because that is a nationalistic war as well.
It is.
Yeah. Nation rising against nation, hey.
brother against brother, ethos against ethos. I mean, it's
Let's give them,
ethnos against ethnos, not ethos. Ethos is spirit, which we're going to talk about that in a little bit here.
yeah. Can we give the listeners a definition of Christian nationalists as opposed to just a Bible believing, God fearing Christian? What's the
Well,
difference?
we're looking at, the whole idea in America is that we were founded as a Christian nation, and that flies in the face of all historical documentation, all of it. I've saw an argument made that, well, the states were trying to do this, and Thomas Jefferson within the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. Okay, look, Thomas Jefferson, for one, was a rationalist, or, he didn't believe in the spiritual aspects of things, but he also knew that it was very important to have within that First Amendment, within the Bill of Rights, the rights for people to worship as they chose, because he saw the power that was being structured by for instance, the Anglican, the England Church of England here in America, which was run by basically a bunch of nobles and, the high upper class in these areas, as other movements were trying to spread out, and they were trying to put the kibosh on them, put in just effort to completely silence them and stop them. And he's like, no, we can't have that here. People need to be able to worship in the way that they see fit. And we could even break this down even deeper if we wanted to go way further in the past. Look at our nation's capital and how it's set up. I mean, everybody knows that there was Masonic work that was involved with the building of that capital, all the symbolism, everything. Okay, so you cannot go and state that this nation was founded as a quote-unquote Christian nation. Were there tons of Christians here? Of course there were. But there was a reason that Jefferson knew the separation between church and state. And this is a big thing in understanding, for instance, the Roman Empire. And I'm not talking about when Christianity came along. I'm talking about the political ramifications of what was happening with Rome and the fact that they mixed the political with the religion. They would go and take the deities from other nations to win their wars. They would adopt them into their pantheon and sacrifice to them. And it's a huge key in understanding everything. But the biggest chief thing in understanding Rome was the fact that they mixed politics and religion. And what did they do at the time of Constantine? And everything started shifting to the Western Roman Catholic Church and then later to the Eastern Church. It was a mix of politics and religion. And this kept building and brewing. It was some of the foundational aspects that made everything break apart in Europe. You had the 30-Year War where you had Christians fighting against Christians. Prior to that, you had the Crusades, where were launched by the Pope from the Western Roman Church in Europe. And the first thing they do is they go flying through Europe and they start killing Jews. That's when the pogroms began. They show up in where? Constantinople, the seat of the Eastern Empire, then make their way out of there. Now read Ezekiel 38, where it talks about all those nations will be gathered, and they're going to roll up and through with the hook in the jaw. They're going to come up into Turkey just like they did the first time around. This is exactly what's described in Ezekiel 38. It played out at the time of the Crusades. It's this mix between religion and politics that were never meant to be. There was a tricky question that came along where the religious organizations at that time were trying to trick Jesus, and they said, oh, well, what about the coin here? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's. Okay, he wasn't saying don't pay your taxes, give Caesar what's his. But he was even telling you there's a separation between the two. And Arthur, you brought up a great point in our chat earlier today. Why don't you bring that up? Because you can't serve something else.
Yeah, mammon.
And it was a coin.
Yeah.
It was twofold.
That is a good point. So are you trying to say that maybe enforcing the 10 Commandments and prayer back into school might not be the best idea, in the sense of, I mean, it's a good thing, don't get me wrong, we're Christians here. But when you are forcing people, doesn't it have the opposite effect?
It pushes them away.
Exactly.
And how can you do the job of reaching people when they already see you as the enemy before you even had the chance to speak? Now, there's a certain pre-tribber out there that all she does is comes out and rants and raves about the wicked, evil people of the world. And I'm going, why aren't you spending your time reaching the lost as opposed to sitting on your pulpit and screaming about how evil everybody else is? You lose perspective in this way.
She's actually calling other Christians who oppose the pre-trib rapture doctrine wicked and evil people, demonic.
Yep.
So what I wanted to add into where we are right now is not just her, I got blocked by that pastor you told me to leave alone over on
Yeah.
X. I
The
had
guy
it
that
out.
claims to be a pastor?
Yeah, I had it out with him a little bit, and he didn't like what I had to say. I guess the truth hurt, but I was blocked and deleted by him. But anyway, I'm already seeing a division between two classes of Christians, and it's just in the rapture doctrine. So I fired a meme onto my Facebook wall, and I don't know if y'all have seen the trailer for the movie Civil War, where the guy's got the military uniform on. He's got the M16 and he's got a pair of reddish pink glasses on. And he asks the people, what kind of citizen are you? Talking about, left or right, Democrat, Republican. But I fired it into the slant of what kind of Christian are you? Is the division that we see happening right now going to be they will hand you over to be persecuted and killed? Or could that be Muslims? Or could it be left wingers? Or a combination of all three? Because I see a division happening amongst Christians
There
themselves.
is a massive division. And look, it says the people of your own house will rise up against you in that day. I have literally dealt with family members, that don't see things the way that I do. And the divide it's growing even deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's growing along racial divisions as well within the church itself. And it cannot be. It's literally got to stop, but they have pushed things so far forward now at this stage. I don't foresee that it's going to stop. And you can even see this happening on the streets. For instance, Portland came into the news today that they're about to send troops into Portland. And then the rumor board started circulating that the troops were already there. Well, we double checked. It turns out that ICE agents are there. There's been a big battle that's been ensuing between ICE agents and people on the ground.
That is a battleground.
Yeah, and like I said, brown shirts. I'll keep that under wraps. You can look it up if you want to know what I mean.
Jumping back real fast to family members, are they more patriotic towards like the Trump administration and the moves he's making?
Big time.
Because a lot of the moves he's making, I think you pointed out in our pre-show discussion, they're not as much for the people as people would like to believe they are.
No, they're not. The entirety of the organizations that are supporting this movement, that are behind him, that were brought in because of the Citizens United law that was passed through the Supreme Court that allowed what is this infamous C4 dark money. This is a money trail that cannot be traced, that can be now poured into political organizations to get their candidates through. And they use some really dark and deceptive means to pull this off. But some of the biggest money has been funneled through. And, sitting at the top of it, you've got the Heritage Foundation with the infamous Project 2025. Well, it's a Christian nationalist organization. Oh, it has been. And they've been doing a lot of things. And there's tons of those members that are right now sitting inside of the administration as we speak.
I've seen a lot of posts in social media from people who were diehard Trump supporters in the beginning saying, I did not vote for this, on a ton of different things that are going on currently, from Venezuela to Portland to you name it. All the political moves, all the ICE, they're equating it to, like you said a few minutes ago, the brown shirts, which technically is heading towards a bit tyrannical.
It is. And since when do we see troops on our streets? And this force, in this amount, okay, for one, this is unconstitutional, but he already wrote an executive order to, have a fast reactionary force that will put down what they consider domestic, disturbances, disputes, whatever they want to call it. Chicago right now has got great big protests that have been taking place with ICE all throughout the week. We touched on it last week. Well, it's gotten worse. And, this is just a long list. Right now, the military, all the top brass is being mobilized. They believe it's going to be in Quantico, and they're going to give a speech on the Wario ethos. And little bits and pieces have been leaked out now to the public. Part of this is going to be a discussion on our national issues. But, everybody remember, they changed the name from the Department of Defense to the Department of War.
That's big time.
It's major. It is major.
We have become, I've heard a lot of people through years past say we're the sheriff of the globe, or flat plane, whichever way you want to look at it. But we're the sheriff in town. Well, we've become the bully in town. it seems like here lately, because I just saw they're revoking the president of Colombia's ability to come into America or something. I forget what it was. I
Yeah,
just
I saw
glanced at
something
it.
about that earlier.
So what? We just excommunicate anybody we want to if they don't follow our will? Just boom, boom, boom. They're throwing out everybody.
To be completely honest, guys, I think the US has been perceived as a bully by most of the nations in our world. And now it looks like that stuff is coming back home because since those bombs were dropped in Japan, the US hasn't really been altogether police worthy, or how'd you say, on the moral side of things. Like if you talk to Russians, South Americans, the global South, so to say, they would all tell you the same thing. They're all sick of it. And now it looks like it's coming home.
Clarification on Arthur's commentary. He would be qualified to give any opinion on what's going on in Europe. I'm not going to name right where he's sitting at by any means, but if you want to know what's going on over there, he would be the one to tell you.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it was very strange when Putin moved into the Ukraine. You wouldn't imagine how many people were coming up to me and being like, yo, nice one. We're all like behind this guy. And I'm not here to say that it was the right thing to do or in any way am I supporting the Russians in the Ukrainian war. But people were looking at it like finally someone's standing up to the bully. And now we see a lot of other nations being emboldened and a bit of a coalition being put together, if you ask me.
Well, there's definitely is one with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, for instance, and with China and all that. The whole Eastern board is essentially to the point where they're fed up with the new Roman Empire, or as we would like to call it, Mystery Babylon in the Bible, as they bully all the nations.
Yeah, you got BRICS as well. There's all kinds of stuff going on.
So stepping back to ask Arthur a question, the bully that was being stood up to being us backing Ukraine,
Yeah, something you
that
have to
Putin was
understand.
that Putin was
Yeah, the way the Russian propaganda portrays this whole conflict is they're not really fighting the Ukraine. They're fighting NATO and US by extension. That's how it's portrayed. If you watch RT or any kind of propaganda, they're actually very sorry about Ukraine. They still consider them brothers in a brotherly nation.
that is sad that the peoples in both of these countries are being used as pawns on a chessboard to accomplish the mission of governments and their desires to take over natural resources and crush economies and you name it.
It breaks my heart, bro. Like, when this all kicked off, I was physically sick for like a month because I have friends and family on both sides of the conflict. And the amount of family and friends that I don't talk to anymore for the same reason Brian doesn't talk to the people who support one or the other side. And yeah, in the beginning, to be honest, I was like, how should I say this? I wouldn't say I was supportive, but I would say I was very outraged that Russia made a move like that on a brotherly nation. It was very confusing, very
Well,
heartbreaking.
it was said that he was doing it to stop the Nazism they were attacking
Yeah,
in the Donbass region. I think it was. What's the eastern side of Ukraine? Those four
yeah, Donbass.
provinces, the Donbass. They voted to be in with Russia, and basically Putin was coming in to liberate them from Ukrainian control.
That's the official line. The official line is denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine. But if you look at what was actually happening, there was massive buildups of NATO troops on the borders.
Yep.
For months, there was an agreement signed actually with the Ukrainian government that was basically accepting them into NATO, not immediately, but in some time. So that's what kind of pushed it over the edge. He
Yeah,
was
and I
not
mean, they
going
were
to.
even moving towards the European Union as well, and they're still trying to make that move.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to happen because the way NATO is actually treating them is appalling. I mean, if they wanted to help them win this war, it could have been done differently. But you see the drip feed of exactly enough equipment, ammunition, and help to not lose this war, but they don't give them enough to win it. They
Well,
don't
I mean,
even let
they're,
them.
from their end, and I don't necessarily take their end, what they're saying is they're afraid of provoking Russia into a full-scale World War III, and that's their reasoning for not moving beyond. that.
Well, to throw to throw even more in there, the Kinjal hypersonic missiles that are flying into the Ukraine, the Russian ones, they have American chips in them. And
Surprising.
they wouldn't fly without American chips. So if this conflict was to be ended swiftly, just a simple stop deploying chips, was selling chips to Russia, probably would have been a big deal. But instead we see other moves, which are strange because it seems like this conflict is feeding the military-industrial complex. That's what I see.
Well,
Yes,
it
it is.
is, and even Elon Musk has a point of control that is ridiculous. No, he controls the satellite systems that control the cell phones, which are the way that they basically, move their troops, their radars used for missiles, for drones, everything. And he even has a couple of times just turned it off and completely changed the course of the war between the two nations.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. The Ukrainians are not really being allowed to win this war, and they don't let them use the rockets to strike into like further than a certain amount of kilometers or miles, and they keep upping that because the Russians are making advancements on the battlefield, and it's just a slow drip feed just to keep them going and keep them alive.
Well, I've seen the U.S. Ukraine supporters against Putin basically claiming victory in that they're saying they've pretty much taken out enough of Putin's oil refineries that the economy is collapsing. They're hurting. And I think it was Trump that said he believes that Zelensky and Ukraine can now push forward, take back, and maybe even take a little more.
Well, he even on top of it told NATO this week if any planes come into NATO airspace, shoot them down. Well, to add further insult to injury, we had Russian airplanes that came into Alaska's boundaries this week and they had to be escorted out, which they do that from time to time. I've seen that happen several times over the years, but that's pretty provocative at this stage.
Yes, it is. And don't think it went without notice what you said back a few minutes ago. You basically equated the United States to Mystery Babylon. You're going to have to definitely clarify that one for us. That's an elephant in the room, bro.
Well, and this is where we dive into some history. Now, I've been going deeply, still working through the whole Gog Magog situation. Now, I'm going to throw something out there because this is something I discovered going maybe 10 or more years ago, even further back than that in Ezekiel 38, you've got 10 groups of people there, and I've always thought that could be very well be the 10 kings. Now, look, I've got more than enough proof to basically state that those are the 10 kings. But there was one center point in the middle of that was always causing the most trouble for every one of those nations involved, and they all fought back in big ways, and that's Rome. Now, if we look at the seat of power after Rome collapsed, and it still, of course, continued through the Roman Catholics and then the Eastern churches, but keep going down through history as the torch has been handed off. It went, through various nations. Britain before us was considered the chief power, and then the United States took over that role. But consider some things here. Staten Island is a city that is built upon 7 hills that overlooks what? It overlooks Statue of Liberty. Now, I found this out here. I did a little search because a lot of people have connected that the Roman correlations between the United States and Rome are definitely there. Now, I did a little search to see if anybody else caught this about Staten Island. And I'll read this here. This is from ChristianFormSite.com by an author named D. Dave Lucas. And this was posted in 2014. They caught it. Babylon, a real place in New York, was prophetically named. The Bible reading Miss Conklin compared the new hamlet to the biblical city of Babylon and proposed that name in apparent defiance of the area's rather bawdy reputation as a stopover place for travelers on Long Island. Her son was appalled by the use of an unholy name. The family legend states she replied, but it will be a new Babylon. The name stuck despite some effort to change it. The Statue of Liberty is associated with the Great Seal of France, which has 7 points to her crown and which is associated with the Roman goddess Juno, which is also the Greek goddess Hera. Roman deity Libertas assumed goddess status and had 2 temples on 2 of Rome's 7 hills. The 7 spikes on the crown represent the 7 seas and 7 continents. Revelation 17:3. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a beast. So not as part of the beast, but associated with Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. Verse 6, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. A definite scripture which brings Rome, Istanbul, and Jerusalem into focus. And why do they say Istanbul? Well, that was Constantinople as well. That was also built on 7 hills. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. New York has an area called 7 Hills, but does not sit on them to my knowledge. But this scripture, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute, and they will burn her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Then swings the idea back over to New York. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxury. In her heart she boasts, I sit enthroned as a queen. I am not a widow. I will never mourn. The above scripture leaves out Rome, Istanbul, and Jerusalem, which all have been invaded and destroyed to some extent. In our modern world, none of these has a global outreach. Woe, woe to you, great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. The above scripture excludes Rome and Jerusalem, to a lesser extent Istanbul. Verse 24, in her was found the blood of the prophets and of God's holy people and all who have been slaughtered on the earth. This scripture points to a major persecution. Alternatively, it brings Rome, Istanbul, and Jerusalem back into contention for past persecutions. But for me, New York is Babylon the Great. Now, I want to add something in here, folks, so you understand something about Rome. Now, Rome's foundational myth tells you a whole heck of a lot more than you would first see. The whole Romulus and Remus, 2 orphans that were set alight on a river, and a wolf came along and nursed them. Well, the word for that wolf is lupa. Lupa doesn't only mean wolf. It also means prostitute. And there's a lot more there, because Rome was founded by outcasts and, migrants, essentially. They attacked the city next to them in their foundational story, attacking the Sabines, and then raped them so that they could reproduce more people to people their lands that were built on the 7 hills. It's, folks, what was the foundation of the United States of America? It was migrants, outcasts, you name it. I'll let you guys comment on what I just read.
Jaw dropping. I'm going to throw this in. Sitting on many seas. Don't we have about 900 and some odd military bases around the world?
That is a good point.
We can definitely move our influence around the globe, can't we?
Yeah, with that, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no, go ahead. It's time for me to take a break.
I was just, a lot of things actually kind of coming to mind when you were reading that, especially from the book of Revelation. A couple of things. Let's say that she is not a widow and she will not mourn. Kind of sounds like she doesn't have a king, or maybe she changes the king every 4 to 8 years. Don't know, maybe that's a stretch. But the merchants really like her and are committing adultery with her and getting very, very rich off her. And I mean,
And
who's
it's
the number one?
definitely a correlation that happened in Rome as well.
Yeah. Who's the number one consumer these days?
The United States.
Bingo.
Now that we have tariffs stacked on all of that, I don't know how in the heck that's going to play out completely. Not good, let's say that much.
Well, it's going to bring the adversaries more closer together.
But, as I pointed out, I don't remember if I brought this up or not. What we have happening here in the United States, the more I started digging through Roman history, there were some other aspects that went on. And I started looking at Julius Caesar, and then I started looking even more deeply at Julius Caesar. Now, Rome was essentially a republic, but they were also considered a conservative republic. It was ruled over by the wealthy, the nobles, all the high class, rich class, and they were making all the rules over the people in Rome. Whereas a democracy in Greece was completely different. The people actually were allowed to vote. It wasn't being ruled over in that way, and so on. But when you deal with Rome, it's like I said, it was a conservative republic. And then something happens different with Julius Caesar. First, he runs for a position as the religious leader of the nation. Then he takes his course in his wars against Gaul and France. Practically almost commits genocide before Romanizing everybody through their peace treaties and what they do then. So the Gaulish population inside of France still exists, but he did what the Romans do. They subdue everybody and then make them Romanized. But then more little tidbits started to play out with the way the governing body was set up. They had two people that essentially ran the nation. And going through a process, he basically comes back from Gaul. They're about to get rid of him. He crosses the Rubicon, says, let's roll the dice. He doesn't know what's going to play out next. Storms back into Rome with his armies. Now, as time progresses here, he essentially gets back into office within their Senate. And on a populist platform, I hope everybody realizes what I just said. Populist comes from Julius Caesar. Trump is considered a populist on a populist platform via the military, because what happened during this course of these civil wars that were playing out? The people didn't agree with something that was reached in the Senate, and they stormed the Senate and destroyed it. Did they raise it to the ground? I can't remember offhand, but this happened actually several times. Everybody not remember what we talked about last week with the January 6, 2021 insurrection as they stormed the Senate? Look, go out and watch the video of the 6. You can find this out here anywhere. Trump is sitting there chiding on those supporters of his. He says, I will meet you there afterwards. Come on. After this, he gets made the dictator because there's civil war going on and they have to declare what? Martial law. That gives him power. Essentially, he gets set in a place where he gets put in power for up to 10 years, but they'll review it every year. And then lo and behold, finally comes along the infamous Ides of March, where the senators rose up and killed him. But the Caesars weren't removed. That form of rule didn't disappear. It went on. Then you had Augustus, you have Nero, you got Caligula, you got all these famous emperors throughout history. They purposely broke the chain of monarchy when they established their governing body after being ruled by monarchs for a certain period of time and having huge problems. But then they turned around and went back to another form, which later down in history, the Caesars are declaring themselves as being divine, as being gods. Now, remember what I brought up about the religious leader? Has everybody forgotten about all the evangelical leaders that got together and were praying over Trump and doing all that? All those Christian nationalists? It's the same thing. So if you want to know what a Christian nationalist is, okay, everybody looks to Nazi Germany. They look to what happened with Mussolini. They look at all these things. If you want to understand it, you need to go back to Rome to bring it into biblical clarity so you can see what's coming down the barrel.
Ouch.
So basically, we're getting that which has been is that which shall be in a parallel to what happened to Rome in history up into Moderna with us right now.
Absolutely. There's no escaping it. And when you've got all these correlations that tie the United States into being the new Rome, I mean, look, you can look at any pole that they walk around with their flags or their troops, and what's donning the top of that pole? It's an eagle. Okay, where did the dome structures come from that we have in our capitals? Look at the statue that's on top of the United States Capitol. That Michael caught that before I was able to look back into it again because I remembered something about it, but I never got there to look at it. It's Roman. Now everybody goes silent.
Yeah, I mean, pretty mind-blowing stuff. Some good connections there.
I was looking up something. Sorry. I said Moderna and forgot the it. Modernity. My bad.
Modernity, as in modernized or modern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we know what parallels we have to look for. And if we're looking at the fact on top of it, like I've stated before, Ezekiel 38. Now, this started as a theory, but the more I started working out who is who in this picture, the whole thing started to come together. Because each and every one of these nations listed in Ezekiel 38, and I've drawn together the whole shebang now at this point. I've got everything locked firmly in place. And they all rose up against Rome. And they ultimately were their downfall.
You see any parallels into today with America of that taking place?
Well, we know that those 10 kings are going to burn her and eat her flesh. It's going to be the same thing. And when you've got Trump at the UN this week telling all the European nations that you're going to hell, what in God's name kind of message is that sending?
One that could be sent back with a nice fire to burn her and eat her flesh.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to remember how Babylon was invaded by the Medes and Persians because they were partying in the city because they thought that the Persians were retreating. But in the meantime, they diverted the Euphrates and just walked into the city. And I think the Book of Revelation just told us that the waters are people, nations, and tongues.
Yep. And what about the cup that's in her hand? They're drinking out of it there in Daniel 5, where the event that you just described as the writing on the wall is taking place. It's the same cup. Okay, the horror of Babylon that's described in one of the quotes leads you back over to Atagope, who was also the queen that called for Daniel.
You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, and I think also an interesting tidbit would be that the Babylonians relied on that river because that was the river that was making them very rich, bringing all the merchandise in with the merchants. But it was also their protection. And the way the Medes and Persians did that, pretty ingenious, but what they trusted in was what brought them down.
And it's like I said, as the torch has been handed along from world power to world power, I mean, what is this nation made up of? It's made up of all those nations listed in Ezekiel 38. At least the European ones, they're trying to get rid of everybody else. And I mean, we got a massive refugee crisis that's taking place because America did what? Went across the sea and goes flying into Iraq, starts dropping bombs, overturns the whole city. What happens next? Islamic State. What about Abu Ghraib, where they were torturing people? Putin referred to it as a medieval dungeon.
Yeah, we've created some bad stuff around the world we talked about it last week, Libya, Egypt, Iraq, and it seems to be progressing towards Venezuela, but I think there's going to be some more behind that. We can't forget Iran. We supposedly bombed their nuclear processing facilities into oblivion, but I don't really think by reports that we've done all the damage we thought we did.
No, and there's new reports this week that there's another mountain that they found that they're digging into. Plus, they found evidence that they're testing ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles now. So that one's went off the charts. You had the president was at the UN meeting and he's making all nice with Trump, and Trump's, he's essentially like trying to say, well, we can probably fix this. Well, the vice president's off with Russia, and they're saying, we're not going to bow to this. The Ayatollah Khomeini says, we're not going to bow to this. Now further things are happening with Hezbollah. There's reports with Yemen that they're getting ready to lay siege on Israel in a fashion just like what happened with the October 3rd, I believe, attack that started the current Gaza war. Never mind the flotilla, for the love of everything. These flotillas right now that are heading towards Israel spell more trouble than you can shake a stick at because of the fact that Spain and Italy are sending warships with the flotilla.
Yeah, you saw it. Great day. So now the flotilla is being backed by two nation states, military navies.
And Trump turned tail this week and is saying to Abbas that we're going to move for the Palestinian two-state solution. And this is the thing. Trump's rolling the dice, like I brought up earlier with Julius Caesar. He's rolling the dice. He keeps playing both sides of the aisles in every one of these conflicts. Before, he was siding with Russia a bit, just not too far back. Then now he's siding with Palestine, and he's trying to play nice with Iran. And in the midst of this, we're having a warrior ethos, the Department of War. People, if you can't see that something is coming down the barrel on this nation and on the rest of the world as we speak, I don't know what else I can say or do.
All those generals coming back home for this meeting. I think this meeting is bigger and deeper than what we're going to hear about in the public realm.
Yeah, it's going to be recorded, but are we going to hear? Who knows? Who knows how much they'll allow to leak? They're now saying on top of it that any information that comes out of the Pentagon has to be approved before it's released to the journalists. It cannot. They're clamping down every single leak. All whistleblower organizations are being shut down on top of it. Never mind the shutdown and the purge that they're going to do of federal employees when this happens. I mean, this shutdown, they want this to happen. What they're going to do with this shutdown, I think people need to be concerned about. Because if you're going to purge a bunch of federal employees, what else is on the docket?
Exactly. Well, when is this shutdown supposed to occur? October?
The same day they're going to meet for their Warrior Ethos meeting. It's going to happen Tuesday, I believe, is the deadline. He refused to meet with the two Democratic leaders. He won't even talk to them. He said he's going against his political enemies. That's all he keeps saying. Ever since Charlie Kirk was shot, he said they're going after their political enemies. They're going after anybody that's dissenting. That's sending a pretty clear message. And when you've got troops being moved into, capital, into cities that have a Democratic mayor on top of it, that have Democratic strongholds of people living in those regions, because a lot of people that have lived in Republican areas, they got up and moved to Democratic areas, for instance, and vice versa.
All I can say on that is we're going to have to sit back and watch this unfold. And I think it's going to unfold in a way that none of us are expecting. And it's going to be a lot rougher and tougher on the peoples in these locales, not to even mention all the way up onto our economy. I mean, all this is going to have a ripple effect. You shut down the government, people start losing jobs, and it's basically going to head us towards a civil war eventually.
And I think that's what they're trying to stoke. And I don't know. I personally think I can speculate as to where it's going, but that's just it. We got to kind of wait it out. But it does not look good with all the evidence that's been presented as we speak.
Or what do you think, brother?
Yeah, doesn't look good. I think it says there that the angel says, give the cup back to Babylon, and so she can drink it many-fold, multiple-fold. I can't remember.
When God puts down Babylon, when she's fallen, right before that, she's handed back that cup and she's made to drink everything she made everybody else drink. Which brings me to something I wanted to point out. I saw a study not too long ago where somebody was trying to label the 10 kings. And I think on podcast, I have even done the same mistake, trying to name, it's the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Fink from BlackRock, this, that, the other thing, trying to pinpoint the 10 kings. But the 10 kings don't even have a kingdom as of yet, according to scripture. They're probably waiting in the wings, but they're not anybody that we could probably pinpoint and name at this point, because the beast is going to give them their kingdom.
And for 1 hour, it states how long that actually is open to interpretation. But nonetheless, we don't have any outside of like the British throne, which, once again, they're not exactly very powerful. That's the known. There's other monarchies that do exist in other small places that also don't really have any form of power. Everything right now is run through, to a degree, some sort of democratic system. But even in the Middle East, you got the Ayatollahs that are calling the shots. But can you call them a king? I don't know necessarily, but they are a power player.
Definitely. So Ezekiel 38:39, we do know the Bible makes very clear that after the 1,000-year millennial reign, that Magog will make another run. But we know that at some point, Magog makes a run in what we call the biblical end times. Would you assert that we're fast approaching a Magog invasion in the Middle East of Israel, or are we going to place that more towards the end near Christ's coming?
It's near the end towards Christ's coming. Battle Armageddon. I mean, if you do your cross references out of Ezekiel 39, which I explained last week, is the first chronological event. If you do your cross references, Aaron even put 2 and 2 together and put up the biblical cross references in Revelation where it talks about, the Great Supper and everything that's happening. That's when the Leviathan that's controlling them is destroyed. The principality that's over them, because Gog is the principality. That's why a lot of people got confused and said, well, Rosh has got to be Russia. No, that means head. That means chief prince. It's the principality over that region. What region is it over? It's over the region of Magog. Now you find out that Gog is the prince over the locusts, for instance, with the Septuagint rendering that comes up. I don't remember what verse, but nonetheless, that's the prince. And then, the starting locality is the land of Magog. So that's a region, that's a place, but then you get a list of 10. And I was going to leave the merchants out because I was like, well, they can't fit in there. But then I realized who the merchants were. And doing my historical work, as I've done over the years, those merchants are key players. Dedan, Sheba, okay, that's Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Tarshish, which is Carthage, which is the Phoenicians, which are not descendants of the Canaanites. It states right in Genesis that they are descendants of who? Japheth. That means they're Indo-European. They're European people. Whoever started that rumor that they were the Canaanites, for the love of everything. Oh, and by the way, the genetics and archaeogenetics have proven that those people that were Tarshish are definitely what I just said they were. So that can be laid to rest.
Sorry, I was looking something up. Arthur, you got to cover me, brother.
Yeah, I'm a bit speechless because I'm actually getting all the answers I've been looking for a long time, listening to Brian in the past. And yeah, thanks for throwing those out there because that's a major clarification from my
I
own
would have
understanding.
honestly had all of this information probably back in about 2017, but was sidelined. Things went in a different direction, a direction I did not agree with, and I decided it was time to go. So I didn't start doing the work again until recently, and now everything I put together, it builds a solid, concrete picture that aligns itself with Scripture in ways that I've never seen until now.
I'm glad you're back, brother. This is what we all needed.
I had covered something just recently and I had to run and grab it. And you know what's being served on the menu at the wedding feast? When Christ comes back, the Battle of Armageddon's done and Leviathan is slaughtered.
Yep,
Leviathan.
exactly.
You like your Leviathan medium rare?
It's just like Rahab in Psalms 72 off the top of my head. It's either that or
Yeah,
74. I think it's
The book
74.
the book of Second Esdras. Give you the chapter and verse. That would be chapter 6, verses 49 through 52. The book of Enoch describes Behemoth and Leviathan being prepared as part of an eschatological meal. Second Baruch also mentions them, and they will be food for all who remain. So after the war, and the world has been pretty much shot to pieces through the trumpets and the vials, I guess everybody's going to need to sit down and a little bit of something to eat to get back on their feet as Christ is setting up the kingdom.
Well,
can't
it's
wait.
always been there. I mean, Job explains that hook in the mouth and how it applies to the Leviathan. You'll see that reference again in Ezekiel 38 with the hook in the mouth. It's always been right there.
I don't know how big a Leviathan is. I don't even know what it looks like.
Well, it's
But
the
I know
prince and his legions, essentially. All those that are listed, and we fight not against flesh and blood, but against powers, principalities, etc., etc., etc. It's listed the whole, essentially, him and his lieutenants and those underneath him.
Well, I don't know what it looks like, but I know it's going to be table fare. So it's some kind of animal that has the ability to really cause some evil in this world.
Well, it's not an
Y-
animal, though. Like I said, it's an angelic prince and his hordes, essentially his lieutenants and those underneath him. That's what the manna was. That's what Rahab was, that was blasted apart in the wilderness, and then they survived off of it for how many years?
Okay.
Again, like I said, it's either I think it's Psalm 74 off the top of my head.
And in ancient imagery, it's a chaos monster. And there's actually two of them. One of them comes from the earth. And yeah, that's in Job as well, I believe.
Well, I'll have mine medium.
Well done, please.
It's going to get real sci-fi as the angels fall, the beast comes out of the abyss, the demonic locusts, all the way up to Leviathan being slaughtered at Christ's coming.
Well, and I've got the verse right here. Psalm 74, verse 14. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him his food for the creatures of the wilderness.
It's time we're eating.
And Psalm 74's got a whole lot going in here. We discussed this off air because we need to let everybody understand whom the Assyrian is, because we bring him up, but nobody realizes, and we're going to have to get people up to speed. But that's your false prophet coming up in the end times. He's the one that sets up it stands up and stretches out the Azazelim, the abomination that causes desolation.
You mean
Go ahead, Arthur.
no, just saying, you mean the second beast that comes out of the earth.
Well, that too. And we've been in a discussion that we're not going to drop on everybody yet. I've had worked out some things over the years by studying varied religious belief systems in certain parts of the world, and I kind of stumbled onto something years back that I had a suspicion that the Assyrian he's a singular noun. I've had a suspicion he always has been, but I had a suspicion he was doing it in a way that wouldn't be so easily understood. And Arthur presented some evidence to me this week that was confirmed everything I already suspected on how it was being done, and now somebody's actually scientifically proven it.
Yeah,
Sure.
I was hoping that wasn't going to confirm anything. But when you said it did, yeah, that kind of gives me the creeps. I mean, it's, yeah, it's something that we're going to have to lay a foundation for sure. They ain't ready.
We doing it tonight or no?
No. I don't want
All
to
right.
completely blow the listeners' minds at this point, because that's way in the future here. But Like I said before, I had a dark path before I became a Christian, so I understand a lot of these things within the other side of the equation. You know, you've got good or evil or right or left or whichever designation you want to go, like the right and left hand path, for instance. Nonetheless, I understand the workings of these things quite well. So the more I dug into belief systems, especially around Tibet, for instance, I started to really unravel what was going on.
Well, I went down the rabbit hole about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I think I took Aaron down the rabbit hole with me, and we dug deep into the Yazidi and really started, finding articles and going into artwork, and it all kept swinging right back to that Azazel you keep talking about.
Yep, yep. They've been charted all throughout history with being tied into that. Andrew Collins brought that to everybody's attention when he wrote the book from The Ashes of Angel. And my copy was so, every page was folded over at that point. So I think I ended up picking it up on ebook because it just was that, how was I going to find something I was looking for when I was folding every page over to mark something important? There's that much information in a lot of Andrew's books. He's great at this stuff. I've
What's the
had
title of
quite
that
a few
book?
discussions with him.
What's the
From
title?
the Ashes of Angels. Really good, really good. And he's the one that brings that to the table for the first time that I found out about it.
Yeah, it's some pretty dark stuff, trust me. And it ties into a whole lot of the unexplained phenomenon that a lot of fringe Christians have been talking about for a long time, but never seem to be quite right and quite lining up.
Yeah, there's been a real problem with accuracy in that area.
Are you kind of mentioning? Sorry, bro.
Well, I was just going to say, you get a lot of this information in the Bible if you know what you're looking at. People shouldn't have to dive into the fringe areas of, the dark spiritual aspects to literally figure out what's going on.
Well, it's become part of pop culture to dig into going to cemeteries and chasing around trying to photograph orbs and all that. Are you referring to that video you shared with me, Arthur?
Oh, yeah. I'll send you another one where he goes, like the researcher goes into the whole topic a lot deeper. The one that I shared with Brian, and it's mind-blowing reading.
All right,
and it's
send
really
me that
dark.
when we get off here.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, that was kind of like, whoa, because I know people who have experienced some of the different facets of what's presented in that video you shared with me. And I know it goes way darker. I mean, you can go all the way to the movie The Fourth Kind, and you know about the owls better than anybody, Brian.
Well, yeah, that's the Lilith. That's the Sumerian deity that's for screech owl in the Bible. That's right underneath. If you look at the Hebrew word for screech owl, it says Lilith. And it's not the Lilith story about Adam's second wife. That's a later construction. That's not what it's talking about. This is a Sumerian deity, and you can look it up. She's got owl feet and, kind of a creepy Sumerian entity for certain, but this ties into other things in the UFO phenomenon with Angkor Manu, which John Keel discovered that there was a correlation between Jewish writings on this entity and this Angkor Manu appearance, and he noticed that all the UFO sightings were coinciding with this same thing. I'm like, this is a joke. This has got to be a joke. Ties you right back to Lilith again.
That's deep. Think it was last week's podcast we did. You said the word golem, and I don't know if it was in the podcast or in a pre-discussion or a post-discussion, but I know you said the word at some point, a golem. Well, that's what I think the little grays are, is golems.
It is a strong probability. Not 100% sure. I never got to interview one and ask him what he was, but I never had a run-in with one of those. I got to deal with the praying mantis style. Yes, folks, I've dealt with a lot of paranormal activity in my life, including the whole abduction phenomenon as well.
You ever going to share the full story here
Nope.
on air?
All I'll say is look up the Belleville 1986, I believe, UFO flap, because it's one of the most highly documented UFO flaps in history, and a lot of abduction reports started coming forward over the years. I've gone back through to double check to see if anything else is coming out that anybody else reported any events happening to them at this time. And it turns out it's one of the most highly reported events from a UFO flap in known history.
Bigger than Nome, Alaska when that one took down?
Well, I checked this probably more than 10 years ago, so I can't say for certain if it is or not, but I know the Nome, Alaska thing was another big one.
Let me test your memory. Golem. Can you remember anything about the golem that's supposedly being kept in the attic of a rabbinical institution? I forget even which country it's in. Romania?
Yeah, he went on a rampage, and they essentially had to remove the letter from his head that brought him to life, because they put a Hebrew word on them that brings them to life after I think it's for the word for breath, but I can't remember exactly what it is. But they nonetheless, it was like terrorizing the people around there because the Jews were being attacked, and somebody went and built one. But I can't remember off the top of my head where that was located at.
I had the article, several articles, all about. I lost so much information on my last computer when I accidentally deleted a file. I was trying to clean it up, and it was a user's file of some sort, and it contained all my bookmarks, videos, everything gone. I was like, oh my word.
I even saw a couple documentaries on it. The show Supernatural even brings it up in one of their seasons, and it's quite interesting how they portrayed it. They did kind of keep it pretty accurate to what happened, which I found to be quite fascinating. I mean, those writers in that show were pretty good with what they did.
Well, I rented the movie, paid for it on, I think it was Amazon Prime, or it might have been Netflix. No, it had to be Prime because I paid for it. It's called Golem, and basically they take, I think it was a woman, and she forms the body in the clay and says the words over it out of, I don't know which book they portrayed it to be, but I think it's in
Sefer
the
Yetzirah off the top of my head.
the Safari.
I have a copy of it in electronics somewhere.
And created a being just like God created Adam out of the dirt, molded him,
Yep.
spoke over him, breathed the breath of life in him, and boom, up he got and started moving. Same thing that evil does today. And I think the angels certainly know how to do it. And those that have fallen, I think that's what they've created.
This has been my point of contention. I don't think it's the angels that are responsible at all. Because the book of Jude speaks of railing accusations against the host of the Most High. I don't think the angels are doing this. I think there is something else that is happening that's beyond, like you and me talked privately after the show last week. There are things that are beyond our understanding out there within the supernatural realm. Certainly. People want to think that werewolves aren't real. Well, guess what? I got news for you. They are. I've seen them. Okay, people don't think that vampires are real. Once again, they are. Okay, there's a whole realm that is beyond our standard understanding happening out there in the spiritual realm. And there was even there's a program I watched this week. It's this Mystic Britain, put out by the Smithsonian Channel, that they were looking at this episode that happened in Europe, and they came to the conclusion that these things were what they called revenants. And they were people that were coming back from the dead. And there was a lot of documentation of this stuff happening in the Middle Ages. And not like a zombie, but kind of like a zombie.
Well, to bring this kind of back on track to where we were tonight, principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places is what is pretty much ruling over, I'm going to say, let's just say 99% of leaders throughout all countries. Not many are following the word of God to the extent of full obedience, worshiping and calling upon the name of Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. I don't even know if Trump does. I saw everybody when he was first getting going back in 2016.
No, he's not a Christian.
He's a Christian.
He's not a Christian. Him saying he hates his enemies this week and he can't forgive them. Look, he's not a Christian. And there's ample documentation that shows that he's not.
I think he's actually said it. I think he said that he's not a Christian in one of his rallies.
I got a report that he actually, what's the little hat that the Jewish people wear? That he puts one of them on, a yarmulke.
When he's in Israel, but all the leaders of the United States do that. You can go back, you can see the Clintons doing it, Biden doing it. They all do it when they show up there at the Western Wall, and all of that is where they'll usually get those photos.
Right, but I just heard undercover Judaism.
Well, they've referred to him as being a Jew, and that one kind of caught me off guard. I don't know what to make of that. I think it was almost like you're an honorary, but I don't know anymore at this point in time.
Well, they put him on a coin and paralleled him to somebody kind of famous from
good old
history.
Cyrus, and I found that rather a comparison to Cyrus. I mean, Cyrus, There's a reason he was called Cyrus the Great, for crying out loud.
Yeah, and just to expand on your point there, Michael, that you mentioned that 99% of the leaders aren't really following Christianity per se. I mean, there's some information out there about Putin that I thought was very interesting, where this guy, he performs Eastern Orthodoxy in public, which is his religion of the flesh, put it that way. But the religion of the spirit is nothing close to that. He's into like shamanic stuff. So
Brian can tell us all about the shamanic stuff.
Well, shamanic is a misnomer. That was a word coined by the Russians. I believe it was like around 1910 or something or another, but it's essentially a better term is sorcerer. That's what they are. The Khans, when, Genghis Khan and his hordes came storming out of Central Asia into Europe, their sorcerers were sitting there conjuring demons to come along with those hordes. So can you imagine dealing with the armies, which were tough enough to fight as is, with this new style that they were not accustomed to other than when they dealt with the Huns? The horseback archers that they had that were able to turn on a dime and hit any target at fast rates. You couldn't do anything about it, but they had demonic hordes associated with them. And that's where the term Tartar comes from. The European people started saying they're from Tartarus. So they coined them as being Tartars.
So that's where we get the Tartarian civilization?
Yeah, which was it was the Khan civilizations that were set up after the fact. I mean, they ruled a great swath of land for several, generations, going through multiple Khans and all of that. Even if you can get a hold of the Netflix fictionalized Marco Polo, you can get some keen insight into what that civilization was like. I mean, any culture is fascinating to me, even modern cultures. But, some of these older cultures really catch my attention.
How long we been on?
We're at the 116 mark now. Well, I think we stumbled into a path that we don't normally go down, but...
Yeah, we kind of went off track, but I kind of tried to pull it back in. But we got to see how Arthur's faring. Arthur, have you drank a pot of coffee yet?
Yeah, my fifth one.
A pot or a cup?
A pot.
Gosh.
Great day.
How do you plan to sleep at all?
That's okay. I'm used to it.
What time is it?
It's 4 a.m.
Man, if we keep going, Bri, he can watch the sun come up.
Yeah, soon.
For the listener, he's sitting outside on the balcony because he has company and they're all asleep. So he's sitting outside with the birds chirping. We had dogs barking at first, but they settled down.
And then that mysterious place where you live, I can imagine it's probably a pretty interesting place to look out and view.
Yeah, definitely. I actually live on a mountain.
Nice.
All alone and with beautiful views.
Hall
dogs
of the
in the
Mountain
distance.
King.
There is so much history in that area. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm very fortunate to be here. I can't complain.
Well, last week, Bri, we had said we were kind of going to start moving towards like going back to the Garden of Eden and moving forward through biblical history. But I don't know if right now in this day and age, if we're going to be able to get away from news events other than just grabbing news and saying, this kind of parallels this from the Bible, this, and this. And I don't know if we're going to be able to step away from news. You think we are?
Well, we might have to start doing 2 recordings here a week or something. I don't know how we're going to get this in, but I wanted to actually start working with Ezekiel 38, and then we'll start working backwards towards those areas because there are primary considerations that do have to come in concerning Eden. It's like, where everything started. So we do have to kind of get that situation all completely drawn into the equation so people can understand prophetically why certain groups in certain parts of the world are doing certain actions so it lines up and makes sense. And that's the whole reason for, with Ezekiel 38 and 39, those are key players in end-time prophecy. We've got other end-time prophecies that have key players. There's some that have eluded me. I'm still not 100% certain I've locked in Amalek, and I came across something this week that has me scratching my head now, making me wonder, who in the heck is this now? And I even on top of with the Ezekiel 38, one that had me concerned was the Libyans, the Libu. And now look, modern-day Libyans are not the Libyans of ancient times. They were described as blonde-haired and blue-eyed. I know this from my work on the Sea People, so that had me highly, highly concerned. Well, it turns out that the modern-day Berber, and I spoke about the Sami people before, they're one and the same. That's the ancient Libyans, and I was really freaked out. I wasn't going to be able to track them down because when I tried in the past, I even spoke to David Roll about this and asked him, is there any information out there on the Libyans? Luckily, genetics put the whole picture together, and now I know it's the modern day Berber people, which that root of that word comes from, guess what? Barbarian.
Which barbarian just means what?
Foreigner,
Wanderer?
outsider,
Foreigner?
somebody not from Greece or Rome. They further extend it to mean ignorant and this, that, and the other thing. But when you start studying each one of these cultures that they labeled as barbarian, they were not ignorant and this, that, and the other thing. They all had sophisticated civilizations set up, were master craftsmen, farmers, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, So when you get to the deep roots of the archaeology and everything that's been turned up, it just gets even more fascinating by the minute.
I think myself and probably the listeners are going to be astounded when we move all the way back to Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and then track those people groups north, south, west, east, and figure out where those three went and the people groups began to populate, grow, and split into other people groups.
Well, I'm personally keeping it to just the main ones that we know we have to watch for end time prophecy, because trying to track all those movements of all the people in the Table of Nations, you have no idea of what kind of work that would take. I've got the stuff in my possession, the books I would need to be able to draw that all out. But the problem is these things are not that simple. When you've got complex variables that come in with weather things that happen, complex variables that come in with migrations that happen, with invasions that happen. And this list just keeps going. Now, most of the Middle Eastern nations, a lot of people assume, well, that's the original inhabitants in each one of these places. But when you had the Islamic empires start rising up, especially at the time of the caliphates and then moving forward into the Ottoman Empire, a lot of those areas were flooded with Arabic people. So you've got like small, sets of the original population will maybe be in those areas. So some of these are not easy to track by any stretch of the imagination.
All right. You mentioned blonde hair, blue eyed. Do you know, I even probably got some of it from you in years past, how many different regions, countries have blonde hair, blue eyed pop up in their genealogies? Like, I think Afghanistan has blonde hair, blue eye.
They have some in their region.
I think Iran has blonde hair, blue eye. It's kind of astounding to see those DNA traits in the Middle East, but they're there.
Well, they get spread through different genes, and that whole thing is even complex to attempt to explain. I mean, you've got all these variables that work into the genetics, that mutations come in, and all these other things that feed into understanding who is who. And then you've got the Y DNA and all those, the MT DNA, which comes from the mother. And that adds in all these other variables. And so this stuff gets really complicated. So luckily,
through war and conquest, wouldn't some of that take place?
Well, that's one aspect that causes it. But weather has been a huge part of things. When you look at it, migrations because if their food dries up, for instance, and they can no longer, when you go to agrarian societies, those that farmers, if they can't plant and they can't, have their herds and all that stuff, they got to move somewhere else. So you've got a lot of that taking place, and there's intermixing with the people groups that they'll encounter along the way. Sometimes you'll get isolated pockets that will stay within their own groups, but that's rare, very rare and far between, actually. People will move into certain areas and then, guy meets a girl and they produce a family. And then after multiple successive generations, they continue to mix in further with the population, and you get this, this whole mix of people coming from all over the world. And that's where the archaeogenetic aspect of this has made this like critical and crucial to unlocking all this, because they can now draw the genetic material out of those bones, out of the teeth, out of different things that they find, and they can figure out what's going on just from those details. But if you have a society that cremates, then you run into a whole other problem.
So we could conclude that through the takeover of the northern kingdom and the 10 tribes, those people, of course, half of them were taken into Assyria, and half of them were all of them taken. I know they bred in with the Assyrians and basically, as the word says, were dispersed around the entire globe.
Yeah, they were uprooted, placed in different places. The Assyrians had that habit of grabbing people and moving them. The Romans repeated that same pattern, as a matter of fact. You'll see that in a few different civilizations where that kind of thing was taking place. I mean, Samaria was made up of a group, a population that the Assyrians put in there.
So everything's mixed.
Oh yeah, and it's every human being walking the planet right now, has probably got descendants stretching in all kinds of different directions.
That's why we're going to have to be gathered together, neither Greek nor Jew.
Yep, we're just simply brothers and sisters. There's no such thing as one person's skin taking priority over another person's skin. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ.
Well, you want to wrap it up for tonight, brother?
Sounds good to me. I'm getting tired here.
I was yawning a minute ago, and I can only imagine what Arthur's feeling like. We'll make Arthur turn on his camera so
He's
we can
probably
look
going to have
at
to
him
take
after.
like 150 laps around the neighborhood to go to sleep.
I'm already passing out.
I hear the dogs barking again. Sun's coming up.
Yeah, they're back up. This was a pleasure, guys. Really,
Well, you're
really,
welcome to join us anytime.
thanks. It's an
Absolutely.
honor, and it's been really great, and a lot of information, a lot of things to think about and digest. So till next time.
Good night, brother. We love you. All right, Bri. We're going to wrap it up. We pray everybody be blessed and protected in Jesus' name. Until next weekend, we'll see you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. God bless, and remember to love your neighbors. There's no other law that's more important than that, as you'll find in the book of Galatians, as everything is encompassed under that. Try to reach these people that are lost. Don't get caught up in the division. Let's start reaching people for the kingdom as opposed to being crusaders. With that said, good night. God bless. See y'all next time.